So thanks very much. It's really an honest privilege and a pleasure to get to talk to a whole room full of awesome customers and just to get a little bit closer every day. I'm not in sales and marketing. I am actually in the R&D side. So I get to work every single day with incredibly innovative engineers, incredibly innovative customers, startups, and we're really co-innovating the future of Schneider Electric. So this is what I want to share with you today. Now, I am a bit of a purist. I really, truly believe I have the best job in Schneider Electric. So all due respect to my colleagues, I have a better job. It's just true. I have a team of engineers in France that, if you think of the size of a loonie, we're building sensors like this every day, wireless communication, battery life of 30 years. In some case, we don't even need batteries because we harvest energy from the ambient surroundings. And we can communicate wirelessly with these sensors throughout our entire operation with whatever application that might be. Sometimes that's building automation, sometimes that's factory, grid, different things like this. But we take these ideas from one domain and we apply interesting and different transformation patterns to other domains. And this is where the real innovation comes into play. So I love what I do, and I enjoy being here to talk to you about that today. What does IoT mean, and what are we really doing at Schneider? Why does Schneider care about this? I think Susan talked about the big volumes, and Nisa again mentioned about the volumes of devices and data that are being put out there in the world. Schneider is a technology company, so for us, this is a really key transformation. And when you think about some of the numbers that the other two were putting out there tonight, this would amount to a roughly 10 times the number of connected devices as there are connected people in the world, roughly by around the time frame of 2020 to up to 2025. So when you think about that, just to put that in perspective, 10 times the number of devices connected as compared to connected people in the world. This is really, really staggering. This is a huge trend. And what's driving that for us? Susan already talked about these, but I wanted to put a little bit in perspective. When we talk about urbanization, this is a really key trend for us. Susan mentioned by 2050, about 2.5 billion people will move into our cities. Think about what that means for a moment. That's 10 cities the size of Hong Kong to be built every single year for the next 10 years, and we would only just come close to hitting that 2.5 billion number, right? So this puts tremendous back pressure on our food supply. This puts tremendous pressure on our electrical utilities, our grids, our renewables, our infrastructure in cities, everything. When we take industrialization, Nisa mentioned the fourth industrial revolution, and this is really fun to be a part of. But there's also a risk here of becoming irrelevant for companies in the market today, because emerging countries who may have missed some of our past megatrends, the trend to internet, the trend to these other technologies, they're leapfrogging. They're jumping right past and right over top of that trend that maybe they missed out on, and they're jumped already to mobile. They've already jumped to connected sensors. They're already moving to connected factory. They're already moving to Industry 4.0. So this puts a lot of pressure, again, on companies to remain relevant in our emerging markets. Now, 24% of the global output in manufacturing between 2010 and 2016 came from emerging countries, emerging markets. So think about that. Again, this is that leapfrog technology. And when we look at connected things and being connected, Industry 4.0, this is what's driving a huge push for us towards digitization, which is our final point. When you think about digitization, in the last 2 years, 90% of the world's data for connected things was generated in just the last 2 years. 90% of that data in only 2 years. So you can imagine the deluge of big data coming at us. And Susan mentioned, that only a small fraction of this data is actually being used to make decisions. This is why for us, when we look at what keeps companies relevant, what keeps us relevant, and why do we want to work with you, it's because we really believe that life is becoming more digital. Companies, to remain relevant, need to be more digital. They need to embrace the digital economy. And this is going to drive us to become more powered, more electric, more electrified, more electro-intensive. And Schneider really has this baked into our core DNA. This is really, this isn't just something our executives say. This is something that's baked into the culture of every team that we work with, every team that we push out to the world. And this is really what drives us. Now, none of this is new. As a technologist, as an R&D guy, back in the 90s, we started doing transparent factory. So what's changed? I personally came from a startup in Victoria, BC, Canada, working now in Boston, by the way, so coast to coast, just like Susan was talking about. I'm a nice representation of that. When we started, way back in the day, there was this idea that we could connect things. We had internet technologies. We did transparent factory in the 90s. We moved that forward in the 2000s. But what's really changed is the acceleration and the speed at which we can now deliver this. What's changing is in IoT, the open standards, the readily available startup mix, great mentors in the space who have been through failures, who have been through business model transformations that didn't work out. Great mentors, great technology, great open standards, things that are moving much, much faster than we can even imagine at this point. We've also moved into sensing and secondary sensing. So as I said, we have these tiny loony-like sensors that can go anywhere and last for 30 years, wireless installation, wireless communication. If the sensor's in the wrong spot, you move it. It's no big deal. Simple installation without shutting down, so it limits downtime, things like this. Our sensing, in other words, we can put sensors everywhere we want. We can collect data at such a fine granularity that we can start to build AI right on the spot. We don't need massive volumes of historic data anymore. We can do AI in place with all these sensors. So really kind of cool transformations. Taking mobility, of course we all have mobile phones. We all spend too much time on them. But now adding in the fact that we have AR, we have virtual reality, we have different ways of experiencing our environments. We can use shape recognition. We don't need QR codes on everything anymore. We can hold up a mobile phone and it'll recognize the shape of a machine, for example, and I can pull up the human-machine interface right on my phone, right on my tablet, however I want. So these technologies are readily available. And the generation of worker coming in right now expects that. They're expecting this as table stakes. This isn't revolutionary to them. They expect to be connected. They expect to be task-driven and task-oriented. They expect to be able to hold up an iPad and say, how does this thing work, right? Where's the documentation? I'm seeing a red light. Let me pull up the doc and let me see how to fix this red light, right? So there's a massive transformation, another megatrend really, in our workforce, our transforming workforce. And of course, this leads us to cloud, analytics, and AI. And I'm going to show you some examples of where we're doing that. Now, Susan mentioned that to deliver this as Schneider Electric, we have a platform. This is extremely important for us. We talk about cloud. We talk about one edge. We're really focused now on how do we process more data at the edge? How do we make decisions closer to where the technology is? How do we use the cloud as a great orchestrator so that we can take all this information, cross-apply it from domain to domain, and try to figure out, what don't we know about the data that we have already? What could we glean out of this? But what I want to talk to you today about is more important to me is about the community and the way we approach this. Because technology is technology. It's always going to be there. It's easy to come by. There's great advances, but it's really the community approach that we take that helps us to solve real problems. Schneider is, at its core, a technology company, but we started focusing a long time ago on solution delivery and solving actual problems. This is extremely important for us. Nobody walks up to us and says, hey, I'd really like you to do IoT for me, right? Nobody's coming to us saying, where's your IoT? It doesn't work like that. We have to have real problems, real solutions. We want to work together to solve those. And the way we do it is by establishing an ecosystem. We're looking for a network effect with our partners, with our vendors, with universities, with startups, and with our customers. Because for Schneider, this open innovation concept is about saying, there's a cool problem to solve. We don't know how to do it ourselves. We can't do this ourselves. We don't do this ourselves. So what can our community provide us? Who wants to come solve a problem with us? Who has the skills and the abilities and the tool sets to come solve this problem with us? And this is really why we're building such a wide ecosystem around this. Now, how do we build that community? We really look and say, all right, so we have a historical leadership and a historical domain expertise in multiple areas. Susan's mentioned this as well. We have building, power, IT, data centers, plants, and grid. We have operational expertise in these areas, but why did we take these particular industries? Well, again, this kind of comes back to our purpose-driven mission. These are the most electro-intensive industries on the planet. So when we're talking about energy management, energy efficiency, operational management, these are the areas that need the most solutions. These are the areas that we feel we can apply our domain expertise, our operational expertise, and really help and really solve these problems. So this is where we work. This is where our bread and butter. But obviously, those domains are very high level. We also take a really more focused segment style approach, where we work with 20 of the largest oil and gas companies directly. We work with 11 of the top food and beverage brands. We work with 10 of the world's top electrical utilities, things like this. So we really focus in our solution and our domain expertise, and you'll see that around the room and in the marketplace today. To give you a few examples of that, we're working with Enel, Italian grid operator Enel. Enel is very global, very wide. They want to take more advantage of renewables. They want to take more advantage of active grid management technologies. So we're working with Enel on their goal, their transformation goal, to be fully carbon neutral by 2030. A grid operator going fully carbon neutral. Not an easy task, right? Our CEO has openly stated with some of the buildings, these new commercial buildings that are coming out, it'll be abnormal in just a few years to be energy negative. We expect new buildings will be all energy positive. That means they're generating more than they require and selling that energy back onto the grid. So there's an amazing set of transformations that are occurring here. We take Hilton Garden Inn, a really interesting hotel chain that we've worked with through a number of our different businesses. We managed to save around 44% on their energy savings while also increasing customer and occupant comfort. So we're not looking to solve problems in isolation. We're working with their partners, we're working with our partners, and we're working on these things all together with the renewables, with all these different technologies that are available to us, and we're coming to these solutions and coming to these conclusions. Now we're doing this, again, I mentioned, by working with startups, working with great startups in the startup community, coaching them and learning from them. We're working with universities. We've created a number of university partnerships. I now live in Boston. We have a great partnership with MIT. Really interesting stuff coming out of that university partnership that we work with every day. We also work with our suppliers, our alliance partners like Microsoft, like Amazon, like Accenture, to deliver better business value, better business modeling, and so that we can kind of predict how things are going to work in the market, how things are going to work from a technology standpoint. And we put up our hand to say, who wants to come and innovate with us? We have very unique challenges to solve. Obviously, we want to do this in a repeatable way, but it requires this ecosystem approach to solve some of these really big problems. It's also really interesting what kind of a network effect we get out of this by having startups refer to other startups, and we start to get that startup community working for us. So I want to talk about real examples now, and there's some kind of interesting problems that we've solved in the last year. You'll notice that we don't have a aquarium segment, as you can imagine. But we worked with the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, Illinois, on a very unique set of problems that they had for their residents, which are all completely unique residents of their aquariums. Working with Shed, it became very apparent that actually it's a lot more similar to water, wastewater processing and power grid management and all these other things that we did have domain expertise in. But we also worked a lot with their third-party partners and their startup community to solve some very unique challenges that they had. Now, at the top of their list for Shed, as you can imagine, is keeping their animals safe. They have very unique environments, very sensitive environments that have to be managed. And down to things like, if you walked by a tank at Shed, you might think the water looks cloudy or turbid or dirty. But that's actually the exact amount of dissolved solid, the exact amount of turbidity that resident of Shed Aquarium requires, compared to something else that's in perfectly sparkling clear blue water. Many of these residents can only tolerate a temperature difference of about 1.5 degrees. Any more than that, and the resident is at risk, right? They also have, they're the largest attraction in Chicago, and they have security concerns for their people, their visitors, people coming into the facility. So they needed to come up with a solution that managed this as well. And they also want to manage their energy consumption because at the heart of Shed's goal is about sustainability. They really want to be the most sustainable attraction in Chicago. They want to focus on, lowering their footprint, making sure that it's the most sustainable footprint they can possibly be, so that they're a sort of an example to their community. So extremely unique challenges, and how did we solve these? We really looked and said, okay, well, we've got very unique environmental conditions. We can't solve this ourselves. So how do we integrate with third-party systems that are already monitoring? How can we add sensors from the startup community to manage water temperature, to finally manage turbidity, dissolved solids, things like this that we don't necessarily play in. Working on filtration and pumping solutions. We have variable speed drives on the filtration and the pumping systems, for example, to make sure that we can immediately control any sort of situation that might arise with really, really super fine-grained sensing deployed all around the plant. We also had to customize everything we did for every different zone, right? So this required working with the scientists, working with the caregivers, working with animal experts to make sure that we could customize everything they did in the HVAC systems and in the control systems, and then working on the environmental and water filtration systems, working with these guys. Now the other challenge Shed had was huge penalties for energy consumption if they exceeded the demand in their 1-hour window. This would be about a 35% penalty. They have a $2 million electric spend every year. So this is a really big deal. This is a financial concern for them as well. In order to solve that, we've deployed a huge network of metering, leveraging real-time data to make real-time decisions on those environments, but also to make real-time decisions on the business for the energy consumption. We had to integrate, obviously, again, with a lot of third-party systems, and we had to create these really targeted energy profiles so that we knew in real time if we were trending away or trending better or positive or negative, right? All of this helped Shed to start on that journey of being that most sustainable company in Chicago and to be that beacon to their community. Now, moving from that, I mentioned in urbanization, tremendous pressure on our food supply. We work with big companies with Shed. We worked with big partners. With farmers in New Zealand, we worked with right down to the farmer themselves. And we worked with a small startup called Waterforce to create a new solution for these farmers. Now, the farmer in New Zealand, you have to understand, has a daily routine of looking at where their irrigators are and looking at the weather patterns, looking at wind, looking at moisture levels, things like that, and trying to figure out how can they be the most effective for the day. They have obviously very difficult regulatory environment around the water safety, around the water conservation, things like this. And they also spend a lot of time in their trucks, getting up in the morning, driving out to an irrigator, moving it, changing its schedule, get back in the truck, move to the next irrigator, change its schedule. We worked with Microsoft and this company, this little startup called Waterforce, to make sure that these farmers had connected systems on all their irrigators that were tied in with our big network of weather data, weather sensing data, so that we can now, in the mornings, send a message to the farmer, which of your irrigators should be checked. They get this on their mobile phone. They quickly say, okay, change the schedule here, change the position of this due to wind, whatever that might be. But they don't have to get back in that truck, and they don't have to drive these miles and miles and miles to get to these different irrigators. This is saving these farmers somewhere in the region of about 50% on their costs, just to the cost of diesel fuel. So moving from that into another problem that we've solved really looking at AI. Susan talked a little bit about the edge and talked about the advances in artificial intelligence. Now, we've worked, as probably you recognize this piece of equipment on the screen here, a pump jack. I grew up in Alberta, a little town north of Calgary, so these are very familiar. Now, these pump jacks, they're prone to failure over time. And as you can imagine, to service this, to prevent downtime, oil service companies were sending out crews to go visit these pump jacks and check on their health and see what they could do. And so these crews cycle from one jack to the next, to the next, to the next. And when they got there, there was not a lot to do. They could kind of look and inspect and try to figure out if there was something to do. But there's not a lot that they can really tell by this. So what we did is, a couple of years ago, installed a SCADA system local to the thing called RealLift. And this started monitoring data more locally. So when these crews would show up to these pumps, they could look at that data, they could analyze it for problems, and they could decide, okay, there's something to do here for maintenance or there's not. What we've changed when we look at edge and we look at AI is we put artificial intelligence right on these pumps, right next to this data, disconnected from the cloud, running in a 24/7 operating condition, very remote, very infrequently connected. And this AI actually manages and monitors this data. And when the pump decides that it's heading for a failure, when it's seeing a pattern for failure, a pattern for maintenance required, it can actually put up its hand, send an SMS out to these crews, and dispatch a crew to come to it. So the crews don't have to go pump to pump to pump to pump anymore. The crews are automatically dispatched by the pump itself. This saves those crews tons of time, saves them downtime, and has a proper diagnosis when they arrive to see what could be wrong. So moving to Industry 4.0, the advance of AR and augmented reality. When we look at workers and we look at this trend towards millennials coming into the workforce, expecting to be connected, expecting to find documentation, and expecting to interact in a mobile way with their environment, we have a great set of offers around AR and this image recognition. So I just want to show you quickly what that looks like.
The Internet of Things and Industry 4.0 offer us the opportunity to secure our company's long-term future and provide more attractive jobs. With Use Your Own Device and augmented reality, we want to provide useful, targeted production information to users where and when they need it.
Schneider Electric is supporting Bühler on its first journey into digital transformation. This includes visualization of production data on mobile devices. Each application is customized and adapted to the environment and the machine to suit customer needs. For Bühler, we worked closely with them to develop an EcoStruxure Augmented Operator Advisor project for its production lines. The new technology is helpful and sensible.
At Schneider Electric, we have been very successful in supplying globally electrical components for Bühler machines and systems. Now with EcoStruxure Augmented Operator Advisor, we are entering a new field of software services, and we believe they will produce new business models for Bühler.
At Bühler AG, we see the major benefit of augmented reality as the ability to provide customized information to every user based upon his or her needs. Individualized content can be entered into the system daily or even for each order and displayed on the user's terminal. The speed of the resulting information displayed on the terminal is greater than what we could previously achieve using routing slips or other paper or electronic records. One completely new aspect of this technology is its interactivity. This enables users to access real-time system process data or documents such as material data safety sheets, production checklists, or information for visitors, all on an as-needed basis.
By implementing pilot projects to bring digital information to the employees on their mobile devices, here Schneider Electric and Bühler are getting new insight on the potential of augmented reality with EcoStruxure Augmented Operator Advisor. The Internet of Things has arrived in Bühler, and it will continue to expand in the months and years to come always in line with the needs of man and machine.
So just to leave you with a last thought, the reason I want to show you this is we work with companies from the very smallest startup. We work with customers on real problems that they have to solve. And we do this by using our network effect and our community approach. I was talking to Rob, who's going to come up from Calgary Airport, and it's really, I think, the community approach, this relationship approach that we take to solving these problems, and putting up our hand to say, let's co-innovate something together. That's really a game changer for Schneider. We have a huge network of about 500,000 partners and integrators that can deliver and deploy these solutions. But obviously, we work more and more with our customers directly, working with system integrators and other alliance partners. So thanks a lot, and I hope you'll come co-innovate with us.
Excellent. Big round of applause for Michael. Thank you.